This is Ratul Ghosh, and I shall be making the presentation on behalf of the team that consists of myself, Dr. Shomir Kormokar, Dr. Shankar Sharnal, and Professor Deepak Ghosh of Jadavpur University on an acoustic study of negative polarity items. But before we begin, I believe it would be prudent to ponder upon the paradigms of linguistic investigations, and in that particular sense, this wonderful quote by Edward Safford, I find it to be rather pertinent. Language is the most massive and inclusive art we know, mountainous and anonymous work of unconscious generations. In the similar strain, we can say that linguistics, as the scientific study of language, encompasses all attempts at providing a description of any specific portion or aspect, whether phonetic, phonological, morphological, syntactic, semantic, or as per any of the varied levels of linguistic analysis and categorization paradigms, as integral to the pursuit of the discipline itself. So the major contention of today's presentation is, much like the way we notice structural dependencies at the level of discrete lexical expressions in utterances, in case of any linguistic feature as well, acoustic dependencies can also be taught in a similar fashion. So our major aim in this particular presentation is, in this endeavor, we shall attempt to study the acoustic properties of negative polarity items, a particular linguistic feature, and investigate if there is the existence of intonational expectancy for the same, akin to the lexical expectancies that we get to observe at the surface lexical level. And for the current experimental purpose, we have elected to work with NPIs in Bengali language. Now, some of the existing research literature that has been reviewed prior to making this working on this particular topic: Bangla negative polarity items, a detailed study by Diti Bhadra, Bitisha Bhattacharya, Madhumita Datta, and Y. Roy; a book chapter by Hunzenga and Potna, Semantics, What is Negative Polarity Item by Peyatanan, and of course Bengali International Phonology by Lahiri and Hayes. The experiment is to test for the existence of the possibility of predicting lexical dependency upon intonation of articulation by means of subjecting the text or experimental speech corpus to state-of-the-art acoustic signal processing techniques. And the particular linguistic feature, as I have already mentioned, being tested here is the negative polarity items in Bengali language. So the methodology that we have adopted is, our approach to the problem has two major aspects: the objective aspect and the subjective aspect, and we shall be concerned with the objective aspect primarily in the current presentation. While addressing the concern of objective aspect, we shall be dealing with, number one, the physical or biological aspects of speech generation; number two, the acoustic properties of speech waves as it travels through the medium from speaker to listener; and number three, study the psychological or neurocognitive aspects of the speech as perceived by the listener. But our immediate focus of study for this particular paper is, we shall study the pitch properties of the voice recordings through path analysis, and also study other signal properties by means of state-of-the-art audio signal processing. And in turn, to fulfill the third requirement, which I have mentioned before, we shall endeavor to elicit psychological response by subjecting the aforementioned samples to listening test-based human evaluation and develop a confusion matrix premised on the said evaluation. We shall also process the EEG signals, but at a later stage and more convenient stage, because of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, we couldn't perform EEG experiments, although we wanted to be obtained from volunteers subjected to the audio stimuli using state-of-the-art techniques of signal processing. So, in gist, for the purpose of our current studies, we shall focus primarily on the objective aspect of our experimental investigations, more particularly acoustic signal analysis. So firstly, we shall study the pitch properties of the voice recordings or utterances in Bengali constituting of NPI constructions by subjecting them to path. Next, we shall perform detrended fluctuation analysis or DFA analysis upon the recorded audio clips to obtain the Hurst exponent, which is the measure of LRTC. But before we move any further, it would be good to spare a few words on DFA. So what is DFA? DFA stands for detrended fluctuation analysis. Basically, it is an algorithmic tool for scaling analysis which is used to estimate long-range temporal correlations or LRTC of power law form. So if there is a sequence of events that exhibits a non-random temporal structure which shows slowly decaying autocorrelations, we can use DFA to quantify the same using DFA power law exponent. And here a typical class of correlations of DFA given in a variable alpha is given. Data collection, representation, discussion. After preparing a corpus of utterances, we perform audio manipulation, that is relating sections of the audio recording following strict research protocol and as per methodology to keep the down to the same number and order of lexical items, keeping that as fixed reference. We shall then which shall then be subjected to contrastive studies using a state-of-the-art signal processing, including but certainly not limited to path analysis of pitch properties of the audio samples from the corpus. They calculate the Hurst exponent via DFA. So in brief, we just record the utterances, we develop an experimental speech corpus, we subject the audio samples to audio manipulation, we perform path analysis upon the same, and then we obtain the Hurst values via DFA. This is the path analysis. For the purpose of current research paper, we shall take a sample pair of sentences from the prepared designated Bengali speech corpus consisting of utterances that contain negative polarity items. NP1, they're indexed as NP1, she amake patta day, which is the base form, and NP3, she amake ekdomi patta day na. Next, we subject the NP3 to systematic manipulation to obtain the following in stages. 1. We first remove the lexical item na from the record audio clip. Number 2. We obtain the pitch profile of the experimentally manipulated signal. 3. We then remove the lexical item ekdomi from the recorded audio clip post first experimental manipulation. Number 4. We obtain the pitch profile of the experimentally manipulated signal post the second manipulation. So resulting in the final formation of a phonologically ill-formed utterance, but with the same number and arrangement of lexical items as the base utterance. This is NP3 after removal of na and NP3 after removal of ekdomi in stages. Now the pitch profiles have been juxtaposed. Post removal of the section of NPI and then juxtaposing the two signals, that is the root or basic utterance against the manipulated utterance, we see that there is a difference in the respective pitch profiles as shown in the diagrammatic representation of pitch contours in black and red. We next used DFA to calculate the Hurst exponent, and we have obtained the same. We obtained the Hurst exponent, which is a measure of LRTC, and it has been plotted. We then subject the two audio samples to DFA analysis to compute LRTC, and after having obtained the Hurst exponent values, we plot them on a scatter graph. And here we can see there is some difference. So there are two observations, one from the pitch profile and the other from the DFA or Hurst exponent analysis. Pitch profile gives us a post pitch profile extraction of base and manipulated utterance from path and subsequent juxtaposition of the same. We notice that for the same number and order of lexical items, there is clearly a departure in the pitch contours for the two utterances, namely the base form and the reduced or manipulated form, and hence intonationally ill-formed utterance. And number 2, the difference made by the removal of selected portion from the audio recordings is evidenced by the change in the value of the Hurst exponent, which should have theoretically been the same, since the resultant output at the lexical level have the same number of lexical items in the same distribution and same order, and also uttered by the same individual, thereby yielding substance to our claim that there is the probability of the existence of a pattern of acoustic expectancy similar to lexical expectancy based on surface level lexical structural dependencies as observed in natural languages. So the inference is akin to the fact that no utterance exists in isolation in nature, but are instead surrounded by other utterances that provide the discourse or conversational context. Likewise, the suprasegmental feature of intonation does not occur in nature in isolation of the utterance, it is intertwined with it. So just as when a section or lexical item is removed from an utterance for experimental purposes, it results in the formation of a grammatically ill-formed utterance. Similarly, in this case, we obtain an intonationally ill-formed utterance, which indicates the possibility of violation of our lexical expectancy or perceptual inertia or acoustic expectancy as native speakers and evaluators on Bengali language making judgment call on the same or along similar lines. And this is indicative of the possibility of the existence of intonational expectancy for the same, which is similar to lexical expectancies that we get to observe at the surface lexical level of natural language utterances. We have some future plans with this work. This is just a pilot study at this stage and preliminary study. We intend to conduct a listening test on a sample of 100 respondents on L1 Bengali speakers for human response study to see how they evaluate the utterances of the speech corpus and then develop a confusion matrix based on their responses. We also intend to perform biosensor analysis using EEG data, for which the different utterances from the corpus will be given as auditory stimuli. EEG signal processing and its subsequent analysis will also be done. I would like to thank the faculty members, postdoctoral fellows, scientists, PhD scholars and associated research scholars at the School of Languages and Linguistics, Jadavpur University, and at the Sir C.V. Raman Center for Physics and Music, Jadavpur University, for their valuable inputs and willing participation in brainstorming sessions that helped a lot in conducting this preliminary study. I would also like to take this opportunity to express my sincere gratitude to the organizers of the 43rd CIIL SI for providing the platform to make my humble presentation. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you so much for the elaborate presentations. I wanted to know what are the control factors you look at when collecting the data. I understand that you haven't done the ECG data yet, so the for the other production part, what are the control elements that you looked at?
Okay, so essentially what we have done for developing the speech corpus, because that is the only bit that we have done thus far, we have asked trained vocalists who are trained in giving, speech samples, as in they are performers, they are theater actors, and they have been instructed specifically to generate sentences with NPI and without NPI. So we developed list of sentences, pretty exhaustive list, and then we told them to recite them out one after the other, as with less as with as flat line as possible, utterance as possible, as much as humanly possible. I mean. And then we recorded those utterances and developed the speech corpus, and which were later subjected to this sort of analysis that I got to show.
Okay, basically that was read script kind of thing. So you had, and now I was wondering why instead of doing this way, could you have actually created some synthesized stimuli actually,
Come again,
like,
I didn't get you. I didn't get you. The line cut out a bit.
instead of asking them to create now is it clear, instead
Yes,
of
yes,
asking
yes.
them to clear create the sentences flat line, could you actually, I mean, you could have possibly done it this way also, doing a synthesized kind of stimuli, so where you actually create the baseline. So after you take the normal utterances, you just cut off the f0, and then make the synthesized stimuli, and then get the responses possibly. So with the synthesized stimuli, you will be able to control more parameters in terms
Yes,
of duration,
yes,
f0 intensities and all. So possibly that way you can upgrade the different angles of the experiment. So I thought you
Thank you
can
so
actually
much for
discuss
this
that.
input.
Yeah,
I will bear this in mind. Thank you so much.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a good point that Amalesh is making. What I would say, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So you can even create sentences like that. Did you eat anything? No, I haven't not eaten yet
Dialogue form.
anything. Kichunai or something like that in Bangla, and where you can see the contrast, right?
Hmm, 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 hmm.
Or
Yes,
I
yes.
can eat anything, I haven't eaten yet anything. Some things like that. You can create Bangla sentences. I can talk in Hindi
Yes,
or
yes.
Telugu, but not in Bangla.
Definitely.
Okay?
Yes,
But
yes.
it's a good point that Amlesh has made. And it's a good paper, but I would suggest one thing. You have spent so much time on introduction and, talking about general things. You can cut down all those things. It's always good to come to the focus of the paper and then proceed further so that the audience gets much more of what you want to say than I'm not saying that Sasur's definition is good or bad. I'm not saying that. Some of these frills can be cut down so that we get to the point straight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.